Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the wave sheaf offering.
Okay. Let's get started.
It is early spring. A time to harvest at the end of winter. Also a time to obtain seed grain, to be planted for the next harvest that will be in early summer. But before any seed can be planted, or any bread or grain eaten, an offering or blessing must be performed.
The wave sheaf offering, right?
Yes, that's correct. The wave sheaf offering not only blesses the new grain but also helps mark the day we count from, to the day of Pentecost. We will talk more about the day of Pentecost later. It is the next holy day. But we will touch on it here. Anyway, the day of Pentecost is also known as the harvest of first fruits. Therefore the wave sheaf offering must be a time of planting. Barley was planted in the week after the wave sheaf offering. It would be ready for harvest 50 days later. Ready for the day of Pentecost. We are commanded to observe it in Leviticus 23 verse 9 to 14. Notice verse 23:14. You shall eat neither bread nor parched grain, nor fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, in all your dwellings.
Now you would think, if God commanded it, then we should consider it important, but it seems to be totally ignored.
Yes. I have never heard of it.
It seems to me that it should be an important festival for believers in Yeshua to observe.
Yes, that's right. You would think so, wouldn't you? After all, the Bible is Yahweh's instructions for us to follow. In John 20 he wrote how Mary was visiting the tomb of Jesus early on the Sunday morning. Notice verse 15. Yeshua looked like a gardener, symbolic of somebody that plants and tends to crops. Then notice verse 17. Yeshua said to her, Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. So, Yeshua tells Mary that she couldn't touch him, as he hadn't ascended to the Father.
So just as the wave sheaf offering had to be completed and the smoke from the offering had to ascend into the sky before anything could be eaten, so too no one could touch Yeshua until he had ascended to the Father.
So Yeshua was also our wave sheaf offering.
Yes, that's correct. Yeshua had not yet ascended to the Father to receive his acceptance of his sacrifice for all mankind. This parallels the wave sheaf offering, where no grain could be eaten until an offering had been made.
Is there anything more in the New Testament that might add to this?
Indeed. Let's look at John 12 verse 23 and 24. But Jesus answered them, saying, The hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Most assuredly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it produces much grain. Notice how Yeshua refers to himself as a grain, or seed, that is planted and dies or changes. You could say is resurrected into a plant that grows to make more grain. Notice John 12 verse 32. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all peoples to myself. These words of Yeshua allude to both his resurrection and his ascension. He died as a sacrifice, and ascended to our Father.
Like smoke from the wave sheaf offering.
He was buried,
Planted like a seed, or grain.
was resurrected,
changes from seed to a new plant, and becomes a larger crop,
and is now producing more grain.
As in followers of Christ.
Yes, that's correct. You've got it. Yeshua was the first of the first fruits. He was the wave sheaf offering for us. For those of us that will be accepted by him as part of the first resurrection, the Apostle Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15 verse 20 to 23, that Yeshua was both a sacrificial offering and a new seed, sown for the next harvest. Verse 20. But now Christ is risen from the dead, and has become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. Verse 21. For since by man came death, by man also came the resurrection of the dead. Verse 22. For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ all shall be made alive. Verse 23. But each one in his own order, Christ the first fruits. Afterward those who are Christ's at his coming. Paul is actually making a reference to Pentecost. It is not purely that Yahshua was the first to rise bodily from the grave and be accepted by our Father, but that by doing so, he became the first of the first fruits, and became the direct fulfillment of the Feast of First Fruits in the New Testament.
So what do we do on the day of the wave sheaf offering?
Many church groups that endeavor to keep the day simply have a morning brunch dedicated to Christ's ascension. Sadly, so many so-called, ordained by God church officials, will resort to a meal whenever they have no true explanation to cover any one particular subject. Leviticus 23 verse 14. You shall eat neither bread nor parched grain nor fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Notice it says forever. Not only until Yahshua is sacrificed. Therefore a priest should wave a sheaf, asking for God's blessings. Then burn the sheaf over fire, so that his new grain may grow in grace, and that we might be counted worthy to be part of the first harvest. This is the first resurrection.
Okay. So when do we observe the wave sheaf offering?
It is in the morning after the night to be much remembered, and before the evening of the 15th, that is the start of the week of unleavened bread. The book of Joshua may well back this up. Keep in mind that it is commanded in Leviticus 23 verse 11 to 14, that we cannot eat any grain or bread made from it until the offering had been made. Joshua was leading Israel in righteousness by carefully following the law. You can read this in Joshua 1 verse 7 to 9. Now let us look at how Joshua kept the Passover period. By reading Joshua 5 verse 10 to 12, verse 10. Now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal, and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. Verse 11. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain, on the very same day.
That means that they ate unleavened bread and parched grain in the daylight hours of the 14th day.
That's right. Now verse 12. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. Remember Leviticus 23 verse 14, where it said that they could not eat roasted grain nor any new growth until it was offered.
So it had to have been offered by the 15th of Abib, if Joshua was to obey the law.
Exactly. Joshua was zealous about keeping God's laws and statutes. He kept the Passover to the letter. He needed God with him, for he was about to go into battle. It is clear that he and his army ate grain. Would they have done so before the wave sheaf offering?
Not likely.
Therefore the only time they could have made a wave sheaf offering was the morning directly after the Passover, and on the preparation day immediately before the first day of unleavened bread.
Exactly. That brings us to the week of unleavened bread. We will talk about this feast next time.
Okay. See you then.